What if I told you that next month your grocery bill could double? Yeah, we're talking about hyperinflation. It's not just prices going up a little, it's prices skyrocketing, like over 50% each month.
Yeah, and it's easy to think, oh, it's just numbers. But when you see your savings becoming worthless, your paycheck, I mean, it's gone overnight practically. That's the real impact of hyperinflation. It's that psychological weight.
That feeling of like the rug being pulled out from under you, that's what this article, The Hyperinflation Warning Signs Just Got Worse, really gets at. It's not just the economics, it's about trust. When people lose faith in their government, in the economy, well, that's when things can really unravel.
It's true. And one of the things that really eats away at that trust is unfunded liabilities. It's basically like when a government makes all these promises it can't keep. This article mentions a crazy number, $219 trillion in unfunded liabilities just in the U.S.
Okay, hold on a second. $219 trillion. That's so much I can't even wrap my head around it. Like, for someone who struggles to balance their own checkbook, what does that even mean?
Okay, so think of it this way. The government has made all these promises to pay for things like Social Security, Medicare, and pensions. $219 trillion. That's the difference between what they've promised and what they actually have to pay for it all.
So it's kind of like over-promising on a massive, massive scale.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you've got that much uncertainty hanging over everything, people are going to look for other options to keep their money safe.
And that leads us to Bitcoin. The article mentions something called Bitcoin bonds as a solution. But I'm hearing Bitcoin and just thinking of those bumper stickers, and I have a feeling this is more complicated than that.
Oh, for sure. It's way more nuanced. Okay, imagine this. You want to invest, right? But you're worried about the dollar, and you're also worried about how much Bitcoin can change. Bitcoin bonds, they're like a mix of both.
Okay, so how does that work practically?
Let's say you've got a spare $1 billion. A girl can dream,
Yeah.
right? With Bitcoin bond, you're hedging. So maybe you put $800 million into U.S. Treasury notes, the safe bet, and then $200 million into Bitcoin.
So it's like dipping your toes in the Bitcoin world without jumping in head first. You're still holding on to something familiar with the treasury bonds.
Right. And people are interested in this approach because it acknowledges the worries about both traditional currencies and the ups and downs of crypto.
But why Bitcoin in the first place? I mean, it's not exactly the most stable thing out there. Why use it for this at all?
Well, Bitcoin has some unique characteristics. Unlike regular currencies, which governments can print more of and potentially make less valuable, Bitcoin has a limit. There'll only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. That's what makes it like digital gold, this idea of digital scarcity.
So in a world where people are losing faith in governments and traditional currencies, Bitcoin is becoming like this digital safe space.
Some people definitely see it that way. The question is it really a safe space, or are we just trading one risk for another?
It's a really interesting debate, and this article you sent, it seems to suggest that the more uncertain things are with traditional finance, the more popular Bitcoin gets.
Exactly. The whole idea of a digital currency, decentralized, no government control, it really speaks to some people, especially with the economy being so unpredictable.
But isn't that kind of a gamble? I mean, Bitcoin's still pretty new, and its value, well, it's a roller coaster ride.
Oh, it definitely has its risks. But the thing about Bitcoin is that it's designed to be transparent. Every transaction, it's all recorded on this thing called the blockchain. It's like a public ledger. Anyone can see it. That transparency, along with the fact that there's a limited supply, that's what makes Bitcoin attractive to people who are concerned about inflation. Governments
Yeah.
messing with currencies.
So it's like a high risk, high reward kind of alternative to what we're used to. But thinking about it like that, it makes you wonder, are we moving towards a world where digital currencies like Bitcoin, are they going to be the norm?
That's the million-dollar Bitcoin question, right?
Yeah.
And we're already seeing some signs. Like El Salvador, they made Bitcoin legal tender back in 2021.
Hold on, legal tender. For those of us who don't speak economics all the time, what's that mean?
Oh, right, sorry. Basically, it means the government says Bitcoin is a real currency here. You can use it to buy stuff just like dollars.
Wow, so it's not just tech people into this anymore. We're talking about whole countries using Bitcoin. That's wild. But going back to those Bitcoin bonds for a second, if governments start issuing bonds that are part Bitcoin, what does that say to the rest of the world?
It's definitely a bold move.
Yeah.
Some people might see it as kind of a last resort.
Yeah.
Government's trying anything to keep things afloat. But others, they might see it as being ahead of the curve, realizing that digital currencies are becoming a bigger part of the global economy.
It's almost like we're at a fork in the road. One way, we have the traditional way of doing things, but it feels a little shaky. The other way, there's Bitcoin and all these digital currencies, totally new territory.
And it's a tough decision which way to go. Big implications either way. Imagine you're an investor, you've got one of these Bitcoin bonds, and hyperinflation hits, like we've been talking about. What then?
That's what I've been wondering this whole time. Is this actually a good way to protect yourself if the economy goes haywire?
Well, the idea is that if the dollar crashes, the treasury part of your bond, it won't be worth as much. Yeah. But your Bitcoin, if it does what Bitcoin people think it'll do, it could go up in value and make up for the losses on the other side.
So it's a safety net, but one that could throw you for a loop. Volatile, you could say.
Exactly. It all comes down to how much risk you're willing to take and if you believe Bitcoin is going to be around for the long haul.
This is a lot to process. I mean, we've got this threat of hyperinflation, debt, people not trusting the government, and then you've got Bitcoin, this revolutionary technology, but also a lot of unknowns.
It's definitely a fascinating situation, and there are no easy answers.
Yeah, it really makes you think what's next, you know?
It definitely brings up some big questions about where finance is headed, like what role is technology going to play in all of this? It's exciting to think about.
Definitely. Like this Bitcoin bond idea, is this just a one-time thing or is it the beginning of like a huge shift towards using digital currencies all the time?
It's hard to know for sure, but I think the important thing is that we're even talking about this. People are starting to realize there are other ways of doing things, other financial systems out there, and that's a pretty big deal.
So for our listeners who've been with us through all of this, hyperinflation, those unfunded liabilities, and now Bitcoin, what's the one thing you really want them to remember from all of this?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is don't get too comfortable. Things are changing so fast in the financial world, whether it's looking into these alternative currencies or understanding how inflation can affect you, or just honestly being smarter with your money. You got to stay informed and be ready to adapt.
That's a great point. This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. Honestly, I've got more questions now than when we started, but that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right? They make you want to learn more.
Exactly. The more we understand about all of this, these complex issues, the better prepared we'll be for whatever's coming next, good or bad.
I couldn't agree more. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored Bitcoin, hyperinflation, and the future of money. Until next time, stay curious.